So today I'm going to cover using the advanced disposal module of Content Manager. So this is actually a licensed feature. So you need to have purchased that module for access to be able to do this. It's available in all versions from version 8.1 onward. Today I'm actually going to be using Content Manager 9.3. So for those of you who haven't seen that one yet, you'll get to have a little bit of a look at that today as I'm going through the processes. And just to let you know, we are going to field questions after the session. So if you want to send us a chat during the webinar, please feel free to do that, and then we'll get back to you with answers to your questions after the session. So advanced disposal processing, what is it? It's the process of creating consignments of records, which is basically grouping records together to carry out the prescribed disposition action. So it can be used to identify the correct records for disposal, and you do that but through the creation of a consignment. It gives you the option to review the record retention schedules and disposal status to ensure that they've been identified correctly, and you do that using an archivist review function. It also allows you to seek and manage approvals electronically via email to record owners, and you can also add additional approvers during that process. So it doesn't have to just be the record owner. You can add other individuals, whether it be managers, coordinators, etc., that need to approve that disposal as well. That can be done, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And it also allows you to go through and dispose of the records securely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch through the slides now to give you an idea of what we're going to cover, and then I'm going to jump across into Content Manager and go through those steps. So when we talk about a consignment, I'm going to cover off how to create a consignment and how you can edit a consignment as well during that process. So this is the first step in undertaking your review and gaining approval. We need to build and create consignments. So obviously you need to have appropriate permissions to do that, generally at a records manager level. I'm also going to cover off the archivist review and processes that we can execute when undertaking a review of what's due to be disposed. So there's a process of examining the records. We can show the issues and view what issues are current under that consignment. Can also go through and apply some actions to resolve the issues. And we can also re-examine and complete the review. In terms of owner approvals, I'm going to show you and have a look at what happens when an owner needs to approve a consignment, how they can be rejected. So you can approve, reject, and reassign as an owner. They can also view the records. There's a show records function available to do that. They can show what's been rejected under the consignment, and they can also view approval documents attached to those. So I'll come back to that slide shortly, and we'll start actually having a look at what it is that I'm talking about. So for those of you who have not seen Content Manager 9.3 yet, this is what it looks like. We upgraded our environment yesterday actually, so to 9.3, so it's quite new to me as well. It's the first time I've been in using it since we did our upgrade yesterday. So you'll note I'm using a demo database for this as well. So consignments and the advanced disposal function works from the Manage tab. Just to show you in terms of system options for those of you that have access in the features, we turn it on here. So just coming back. Don't do this to me. Okay, so from here, it's under our archiving section of the ribbon. you can see I have the option for consignments. And what I've done here is I've actually created 3 consignments already, but I am going to go through and show you how we go about creating a consignment. So basically the options that you do have to create a consignment are in line with your disposal actions. So we can create new consignments to archive, a new destroy consignment, and new transfer consignments. So you can see here I've created 3. I've created 2 for destroy function and 1 for archive. So just before we go through and create them, I'll just quickly show you what they look like in terms of properties. So the number for the consignment is self-generated. I used a DES to identify it as destroy. You can use whatever number pattern or identifier that you would like to use to create your consignment. So remember, each archivist can create consignments. So you can have consignments of your own, and then there can be other consignments in the system that somebody else has created. In terms of the description, again, that's a free text entry field. I have put my description in this case to destroy records that are inactive. And this would be describing, I guess, the records that are going to be attached to that consignment. So it could be records that are due for destruction within a certain date period, or whatever suits the process that you're actually wanting to undertake in terms of your disposal. The responsible archivist will default to the person creating the consignment, so you can see there that that's me. And what we have here, which I can't edit, is the option, and we'll have a look at that when we go through and do the creation. This is the cutoff date that the consignment's going to use in terms of selecting the records that fit that consignment. Basically what that is any records that have a due for destruction date up until that cutoff date. So if they fit between in that time period, up until, in this case, the 30th of the 11th, 2018, then they'll be returned as part of that consignment. The selection tab is where we can actually draw the records. So all consignments must have a non-blank disposal date. So that by default is ticked. If you don't have that ticked, then it won't actually work. So it's a requirement that you need to have a non-blank disposal date for obvious reasons. And then there's some other options there that we'll talk about when we go through creating one. In terms of approvals, this is where I can identify who needs to approve the consignment and whether or not it needs to be approved. So that's an important point as well, as you can use consignments without the approval process. So if you have a requirement where you might want to group some records together, but they don't require an approval, whether that is a requirement or not, but you can do it without having these ticked, and we'll go through those options when we create one. So the process is quite simple to create a consignment. So from the consignment window, which is through your archiving tab, we right click and select new based on the type of consignment that we want to create. So I'm going to go a new transfer consignment. So you can see here, this is where I can fill in the detail. So I'll call it TRF 123. And then in terms of a description, I'm going to say all records due for destruction, just for example purposes. Because I'm creating a transfer consignment, I need to put in the location that I'm going to be transferring to. So these are all standard functions. I can go through and have a look at the locations that I have available to me. Let's find something in here that we can use. So you can see that I can enter a location there. Obviously, you would be using your state archive or Grace or wherever it is that you're going to be transferring to. I can set the cutoff date here. So I'm going to say, in terms of perhaps the scenario, I might be looking for anything that is due within the next couple of months. So I'm going to go forward to the 30th of October as my cutoff date. I haven't actually tested this function here during my testing. This is where you can render to your long-term storage formats for PDF. So I won't cover that because I'm not sure what the outcome of that will be. And then in terms of selection, this is where I'm given the options of being able to select which records I'm looking at. The query string can be built to whatever your requirements are. Generally, we would use your standard types of searches that you do for record archiving. So using your retention searches, which in this case would be date to archive, transfer, custody. But there's also an option where we can use the top container aggregated selection style, and that's going to look at anything that basically is going to be an all-encompassing disposal instruction. So it's going to look at the top container level. Again, we need to have this ticked for the non-blank disposal state. I can also tick to allow selection of records that have no schedule, and I can also tick on that I want to allow selection of records that are on hold. And that's to, I guess, override what may be in standard settings where we're not going to transfer records that are on hold or in a destruction process of destroy. If we wanted to, we could allow that to happen at this point of the process. So I'm just going to click on view records, which just to see if we have any have come up. No. So essentially here, we need to go off and do some searching to see if we've got any records. And I have a feeling here that we may not have any that are actually fitting that time frame. If you don't have any records that actually fit the consignment that you're looking at, it won't allow you to create it. So you can see here that there's no records found, and without records, there's no need to create a consignment, and that makes sense. And because I don't have any here to actually return, I'm just going to skip across for a second, and we'll use the ones that I've already created to actually show you what happens with the records once they're returned against a consignment. So this is where you can set your approvals. So I tick on that the consignment needs to be approved. And here are the options that I have in terms of who can approve the consignment. I can select that it's required, I require approval from the record owner, which would be in most cases what you would be looking for. And I can also add additional approvers for this consignment. So by clicking the add button, I can then go out, and I'm sure you're all familiar with a location search. I can find the locations that I would like to be additional approvers and then add them to the consignment. And what that's going to do is it's going to then generate an email once we go through the archive review process to the owner and also to the additional people that are added to the consignment for approval. So I'm just going to cancel out of that one there. Is everybody clear so far with what I'm covering? If you're not, just go ahead and chat and pop in any questions that you might have. Okay, so coming back to the consignment window, you can see that I have 3 consignments that I have created here. So we've got the consignment number here on the left, the disposal method. So this has come from me when I select the new consignment type. It's going to put the method in. It's an archive keep forever, and there's 2 destroy consignments. The status is showing the point in time in which this consignment is at. So you can see that I have 1 currently in archivist review, one's currently has an approval in progress, and this bottom one's also in archivist review. So in terms of the steps, first we need to create the consignment. The second step then is undertaking the archivist review of the consignment, and then seeking the owner approval, and then at the very end we can go through and conduct the disposal of the records. So I'm just going to go into this one here just to show you what happens once it's created. In terms of editing a consignment, we can only edit the number, the description, and the responsible archivist. You can see here that the selection and the approvals are grayed out, so it doesn't allow me to make changes at that level, but I can change the number and the description. So the next step is the archivist review. So if I right click on the record, I'm given the option to examine the records and also show any issues that are showing up with this consignment. So I'm going to go through the first step here and examine the records. So you can see here, this is a standard part of the process. So it's completed its examination of the records, and there's 5 issues that have been detected with this particular consignment. So it's asking me if I'd like to review those issues now, which is part of the examination process, the archivist review. So I'm going to say yes. Now I get some detail around what the issues are in terms of this consignment. So you can see here we get an issue type. So we have issues that are resolvable, and we also have severe issues. And here in the properties of what the particular issue is. This severe issue, for example, is saying that it's not scheduled for selected disposal action. So in terms of how we go about resolving issues to move to the owner approvals, there's again, it's the right click option, and you can see here that this particular issue is not enclosed, the record's not enclosed in the container, and that's a resolvable issue, and I can do that here from this right click menu. Go ahead and resolve the issue. I can enclose the record. So we'll go through the resolvable ones first. Again, this one's not enclosed in its container, so I can right click, enclose that record. And we have the same issue again. It's just wanting me to confirm that I want to enclose it to preventing disposal. I click OK. In terms of the severe issues, and them not being scheduled, obviously, depending on your processes and what the actual severe issue is, you would need to conduct further investigation to resolve those issues. In this case, I'm going to use the option to remove these records from the consignment. And what that will do is it will actually take them off consignment. I can go back and review those later on, or depending on what the issue is that is presented, I may need to do investigation. I may need to make some changes to resolve those issues. So in this case, it's saying that it doesn't actually meet the selected disposal action. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those consignments. And I'm going to remove it from the container. It's not a good sign. See if I can get that one off so we can move to the next step. Lucky I'm in a demo database. Wouldn't it be nice to do this in, in real life? So in terms of your archivist review process, another important thing to note is that once you've resolved the issues, it is best to actually go through and just re-examine the records, because sometimes, especially when you've got a consignment that's encompassing hundreds of records, for example, once you've resolved some of your issues or resolved the issues presented from the first examination, we go and do a re-examination just to make sure that we don't show up any new issues that may have come about from the issue resolution that we've just done. So I'm just going to go and re-examine. So here you can see that the consignment has been re-examined. It was successful. And now we've changed status to be waiting on completion. So the next step now is to go and seek the owner approvals. So it's the same process again. We right click, owner approvals. Actually, sorry, I skipped ahead. I need to complete the review now that I have no issues left. So what's happened now is the approval emails have been sent out to the owners for that consignment. If I want to see who the owners are, I can right click and show the consignment approvers. And you can see here that I'm one of those. So in terms of what happens with the approvers, you can see here in the trays menu now, I actually have two options for my consignments. I have my consignment approvals. So we can see here, these are the consignments that are due for me to approve. Now I've got my email closed. I'd have received also a notification. I'll go and just open it and have a look. I closed it so that we didn't have interruptions from my Outlook. Sorry about the delay here. Second. Just going to go back to the consignment tab. So we can see here that the approval's in progress. So if I now go ahead as the owner, I just need to for AKF 123. And this is where the owner can approve, reject, or reassign the approver. So I realise I'm sort of jumping a little bit back and forth between the sections of creating and consignment and the archivist review and also the approvals, but I feel that it's important to show you as we go through these steps what's actually happening in the system. So if I now approve that consignment as the owner, you can see that the date complete has updated and the status has shifted to approved. So go back to the consignment screen. I can see now that this particular consignment is now ready for disposal. So if I want to have a look at what records are attached to that, I can right click and show the records. Oh good, there's no records attached to that. See if we can do that on one of these. Here we go. So when we have a look at the records that are attached to that consignment, we can see that in particular, the date due for destruction fits that cutoff time on the consignment. Now this one has a different cutoff time to the one that we had previously. So if we have a look at the properties of this consignment, the cutoff date is the 30th of November 2018. And what I'm looking for here is records with a disposition of inactive, because that's the particular trigger or schedule trigger that I'm looking for. So going back to what options I have once status has changed, I've been through my review, I've resolved my issues, I've had approval from my owner. I can now move into undertaking, sorry, not that one. The disposal in terms of actually performing it and generating a consignment report. So the consignment report allows me to export into a CSV format. I've got one that I did earlier here in a disposal report locally. Obviously, you can output that to a location of your preference to do that. And what that's going to do is it's going to go out and create the report for me. Where did I stick that? Oh, I've forgotten already. So you can see it's sitting there. This one I actually did yesterday and changed it to, sorry, I pulled it through Excel and saved it back out as an Excel spreadsheet. So to give you an idea, this is what the report looks like. And that the disposal was conducted under, sorry, having a couple of technical issues here at the minute. The container, see the date created, the date inactive, etc. So there's a whole load of information the report contains, the record type, the security, etc. Again, this would obviously be dependent on the metadata that you have recorded against your records. In this case, I'm using the demo database, so metadata is going to look different to what you may have, but you can see that essentially these are the fields that are going to be populated from your data set in terms of the report. So once I've generated the report, I can also go ahead and perform the disposal. So we'll tick that. I have a log file output and log file container that I can write to. And if we hit OK, it's now complete. So essentially what it enables me to do is undertake the process of disposal in an organised manner, and it gives me also the steps to complete in a particular process format. So bearing in mind that you still have, I guess, what your internal business processes will be around the way in which you undertake your disposal actions, but using the advanced disposal module allows you to set up groups for that disposal. Where I think it would be really useful is looking forward. So say, for example, you might be looking at what do we have due for destruction in the next 3 months, and then you could actually go through that process of resolving those issues and obtaining approval to do so. So it can be quite useful in terms of your forward planning for destruction. So I'm just going to come back down to this one here and go through the process again just to show you the archivist review. Going to examine those records. So we can see here that the examination was successful. There were 7 records examined, and I can continue processing of the consignment. And the reason is that there's no issues with this particular consignment. So I'm going to come back and complete my review now. So jump back to my approvals. So this would be your owner, for example. I did want to show you from an owner's point of view, perhaps log into another account. But with our upgrade yesterday, I didn't get a chance to set things up to be able to do that. So we'll just use my account. Now, you can see here that I'm actually not the owner, and I think that's an important point to point out. So this is me being added as an additional approver to the owner. So you can see that I'm not the owner of the record, but I can approve it. So I'm going to approve the consignment. I could also reject the consignment, which would then basically prevent the disposal under that consignment from continuing. So if that was to happen, let's have a look. I'll reject it. I need to provide a reason for my rejection. So I'm just going to say that it's required to be kept. And you can see that the status has changed to rejected. We can also look at the properties of this approval. So you can see here the approver, rejected, the date rejected, and the reason. I can have a look at the rejected records. Something a little bit funny going on here. I expect to see a record under this consignment. So don't take that as it doesn't work. That's more my setup here. So we can see that this particular one, the consignment has been rejected. So in terms of what I can do as under the archivist review, you can see that, well, it's interesting. I can actually still run the report and override in terms of the disposal. I can re-examine again I can go back and look at who was the approver. And I can also look at the reason for rejection. So that covers basically the process in which you would take using the advanced disposal module.